how much pride a manufacturer has in their parts by the packaging. The packaging will oftentimes tell the story. And the reason why I say that is because if they have a lot of pride in their work, they don't want their work to get damaged along the way to the customer. And everyone knows the worst thing is waiting what seems like an eternity for something you ordered to be custom built and then it arrives damaged. It is quite the bummer. Such is the case with the G nose. Euroteck obviously has a lot of pride in what they do, and it's important to them. Take a look at the size of this box and the scale. So that being said, let's open it up and take a look. As expected, everything is packed up very nice and wrapped up tight. But the crazy part is, look at how much open space there is in that box. You could cram a small body in there if you wanted to. Neil's a bit of a madman. He went a little overboard in my opinion with the tape, but everything was wrapped perfectly. I'm thinking that he must be very popular around Christmas time to enlist to help wrap gifts. Neil always takes care of me. Quite happy with the work here. You can see that the carbon work is right on point. I'm very happy with the nose. Neil did a great job. The work is amazing and the nose is very light. But there's something more here that's more important than even the nose. I'm super excited because take a look at this. This, my friends, is the packing material from the nose. That large pile there. And what does that translate to? Well, that means that I could ship things for a very long time without having to go buy more packing material. Just an added bonus. Pulling the nose of the G is really straightforward, and those of you that pull noses on other vehicles are going to be able to do it like that. But here's the thing, I'll just throw in a couple of tips here and go over the process really quick, just in case you need a refresher. Alright, so let's take a look over here. The first thing is, right here, you want to pull the fender liner. There are just 3 Torx screws, and you pull those out, you can push it in. That will give you access to the bolt right here that connects the nose to the fender. The front fender has these plastic brackets that have hooks on them. That's what attaches the front nose. And you don't want to make the mistake I made. When I was pulling the passenger side, I'm used to just pulling. But unfortunately, when I pulled them, I broke some of the tabs. So what you can do is you can actually pull the fender liner back and get back in there with a pick and release the tabs. That way, of course, you won't break anything. So I will have to replace mine. I used the pick on the driver's side. And what I'll do is these that are broken, I'm going to actually use one on each side for fit work. That way I can get the nose on and off easier. It will lock in enough just so I can see if the lines are straight and how the gaps are. Underneath, we just want to pull the under tray. Once the under tray is off, that releases everything on the bottom to allow the nose to come off. And then what we can do is on the front here, you can take a look, but on the front there are 4 Torx screws that release the upper part of the front bumper. The only thing I'll say about that is you have to remove the plastic trim piece above it. And there are 2 bumpers that have studs on each side. To get these rubber bumpers out, all I did was I sent a bolt down with a nut, then tightened the nut against the bumper and backed it out. Once the front screens are pulled off the front bumper, you can look inside, and inside in the duct area, you'll be able to go ahead and remove the hardware that is attaching to the bumper support. After the front's opened up, you'll be able to get a good look at what's inside there, and you'll see the brackets, how they're attached to the front support. You just want to remove those brackets, that way you can pull the nose off. Then I would grab a helper and pull the front nose off. Now we want to move on to fitting the front nose. And what can I say? You don't want to do it when you're in a rush. It takes patience. I've been doing it a long time. My good friend Brian, who owns Brian's Auto Body, taught me almost everything I know about body work, painting, more than I ever need to know in this lifetime, to be honest with you. But I usually always do my fit work here at the shop. But as far as painting, that is a fine art. And my favorite choice, of course, was to always take it to Brian. But Brian is now retired and enjoying the good life, even though he's done multiple cars for me that I've done for Honda, Nito, Enkei, Oakley. So I'm quite sad that he is retired. I'm happy for him that he's enjoying the good life, but sad for me. But luckily, we have another family friend who's working for a state-of-the-art body shop here locally that does work for me as well, and he has agreed to take care of the nose for me. So I'll run through the fit work here because that's actually really the most important part in my opinion as far as making it look right. And if you can do it yourself, you save a ton because it's so time consuming. That's really where it's at. Painting, like I said, boy man, chemical process, I've seen the craziest things go wrong. And Brian is the best, but man, you just never know. When you're messing with chemicals, anything can happen. What I'm gonna do to start is put blue tape on the fenders. That'll protect the fenders as we move the nose on and off. For the small amount of time that it takes to be done, it's well worth the possible savings from an incident. Getting ready to put the nose back on the car, you could see that I had to make some room to fit the side markers. And that's pretty much the norm. Also, what was really odd about that nose is the holes for the mounting hardware wasn't drilled at the factory, so I had to drill all the holes. Now, of course, the downside is I had to take a guess, but I could see in the mold where they had actually filled to drill the holes. So hopefully we're close. But even if it was right on from the nose that they mocked up and built off of, oftentimes it won't be the same on the car, especially if it's aftermarket. And those of you that are very experienced know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just part of the deal. Sometimes, even with Lambos and Ferraris, you'll get OE parts that need some finessing to make them work. Now, of course, you could send it out. Usually it's quite pricey. But for me, the problem more is time frame. The time it takes a shop to fit and get into their schedule sometimes doesn't accommodate what I want to get done here. And I want to get the car on and off as quickly as possible. So I'll do the fit work, and then, of course, my buddy Robert will do the paint work. One of the things that is often a fight for me are what I call the fender liners, or if you're Lambo, you use some sort of special terminology like wheel housings or something like that. But in order to get a good fit, you need to put everything together. So I'm going to go ahead and put the fender liners in, that way I can check all the alignment holes with the new nose. Alright, after that struggle, the fender liner's in, and what I want to do is just point out a couple things. One is, if you look up on top, you can see that I lined up the screw holes. This, of course, is just a quick mock-up, and also it's important that I want to get the fender liners in before I try and line up the undertray. But you can take a look right here and see there's definitely a gap between the fender liner and the front nose. But I can see that the holes do line up with the front nose, which is good news. So the main thing is I just need to build the spacer to accommodate the extra gap. All right, I've got the fender liners fitted, and it's a bit of a fight getting it in and out, but there's something I'll point out that could possibly help all of you, and that is the liner to the nose. The factory nose has holes here. The holes hold the liner in place, but as you can see, the liner is very, very firm in there. I asked Neil what his advice was, and his advice was if the liner is solid, then let it roll and go without the holes in the hardware. But if it moves around, then for sure secure it. So, as you can see, I figured I'll just go with it. Okay, I got the undertray back up there, and if it lines up and all the holes are good, it's basically like winning the lottery, especially when it's aftermarket. Usually, when it's OE, you're in pretty good shape. And this, of course, is why when you send these noses out to get fitted at the body shop, why they charge you a king's ransom. It just takes a ton of time. So what I found was the holes are pretty close on the nose, but the holes would have to be egg-shaped back towards the back of the car if I was to use the factory holes in the subframe and everything. The problem is that there's not much material on the nose, so I opted to actually push the undertray forward, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the holes that mount to the frame. That way I still have material there for strength in the back, and I'm not taking so much off the front that it might just pull through. I used the markings on the nose to drill the holes and open the holes up for the side markers in the hopes it would be very close, and they weren't too far off. But one thing that G has that makes it a little bit more difficult is inside the fenders there's a bracket with framework that the holes need to line up for the side marker. Now it's fairly close, you can see here, but definitely will need some touch up. As I fit everything on the front nose, I'll go over a couple things with you. One thing to watch for is this. As you can see right here, the body line doesn't line up perfectly. It's kind of a compromise, much like a long-term relationship. You can just split the difference. So I'm in a little bit there, out a little bit there. I did the best job I could with mounting the side marker light. Now, what I will say is that any of you that are bodymen out there will say that that is not correct, Adam. You should actually fill this, build this up, come back down so it's even with the fender. I'm not gonna argue with that. But I typically won't do body work here in the shop unless I absolutely have to. One is because it makes a mess. And I'm not as good as Brian or Robert at it. To have them do it, the problem is I'd have to send the car there to the body shop, have them do it, and oftentimes I just don't like to send the cars out, as all of you know that. So an option is split the difference, or if you want, you can take the whole car in, which of course is much more difficult logistically, at least in my case, or you can do it yourself. But really the key is I usually use, to do something like that, fiberglass reinforcer, and then you have to grind it down, reshape it, block, prime, block, prime. Many of you know how all this goes, and it is a very long process. So for me, what I'll do is I'll just have Robert touch this edge up right here, and then I'm going to split the difference. Now, will people notice? Possibly. Not very many of you. Of course, those people that I come across that have the keen eye that do body work, they'll notice, and I'm okay with that. The fit on the new nose is really good. And for those of you that are just thinking about getting into this, it really is what will make or break you. If you go to the shop, it just means more time and money. If you do it yourself, it just means more time taken away from things that are fun. Very exciting news, the G nose has made it back. Robert worked his magic, and what seemed like an instant to you was a very long time to me. However, it is always quality over speed in this department. So I want to point out a couple things that could possibly help you. Now you'll remember when I ordered this nose, I was thankful that I was able to find a lower section in carbon fiber. It was actually difficult for me to locate one, but luckily my friend Neil from Euroteck was able to find it. I'll point out a couple things you might want to keep in mind. I've had a fair amount of experience with cars that do not have parts available for them. They're under embargo, they're sent here, I work on them. That forces me to become somewhat creative. So I'm going to point out a few things here that I did that could possibly help you. Now, as far as beyond the creativity side, the other thing is it could save you quite a bit of money. And it's all left to up here, either you or the painter. But come look at this. Right here, what I did on the side ducts is I had Robert mask and paint them black so you get that look. Now that's a small detail, but in the big scheme of things, it makes a big difference in how the nose looks. It didn't really cost any more, just a little bit for Robert to mask and shoot, and it gives you a more unique look, especially let's say if the nose is going to be all one color. If I could not find the bottom section of the carbon, then it would start to kind of blend together. But because I wanted to accentuate that duct because it isn't really that visible, I had to do that. It didn't cost me a lot. It makes a pretty substantial difference on the side. Now, if I wasn't able to find carbon fiber, because there are a lot of these noses available, but the whole nose has to be painted. There are a lot of different options. You could theoretically mask off where this section is carbon to have it painted black, which is what I probably would have done. Or if you want to be even different, what you could do is mask off this line on the top and bottom and make that black just to accentuate the duct. You can get a lot of differentiation in the look just by being creative, and it won't cost you very much. Obviously, when you start going to carbon fiber, the cost is quite high, so I just wanted to point that out. Now I'll grab a helping hand from my dad and do a test fit on the nose and see what happens. You can also see right here, you obviously would not have to deal with it, but right there I actually had to accommodate the laser jamming heads. So I had to cut those holes in the grill and make the mounts for those. Everything lined up on the nose really well. The only thing I ran into is the LiDAR jamming heads, or park distance controllers to all of us, were having an interference issue. And the reason why was, those of you that do fab work off the car know exactly what happens. I did all the work while the nose was at the body shop. This way, while Robert was painting the nose, I was able to build the brackets and put all the hardware in. But there were some slight modifications that had to be done. I've done that, and now we'll put the nose back on and see if I can get it to work. Everything looks really good. You can see how close the color is. Robert is really good at getting the color to match. Even though I did all the fit work before the nose went to the body shop, it never is just right. So it needed some small finessing to make everything work, and there you can see everything is bolted up. You'll remember that I lengthen the holes to make sure I could get the hardware back in. In the front, everything goes down pretty straightforward. Just reverse it the way you took it all apart. You should be in real good shape. As you can see, I can move really fast. Must have been early in the morning when I did that. As far as the side markers, as long as you do all your prep work right, everything should fit together. Then of course, just cinch down the fender. That's where we were talking about splitting the difference. You can see there. Don't forget to plug in the light, otherwise you have to pull the liner back out, which has happened to me many times as I'm quite forgetful. And there it is, the liner. Always a fight. And to be honest with you, I made a mistake here that I decided not to put in the video, but I was pulling so hard on the nose to get the fender liner in that it actually cracked the nose a little bit. I have to use epoxy on the backside. I was very, very unhappy about that. Unfortunately, as I said, take everything apart and put it together the least amount of times possible, because as par for the course, something will most likely go wrong, which just equates to more cost and more time, which all of you know that love cars, it's endless, that whole love-hate relationship. And we enter the final stretch. Of course, put the trunk back in. Don't forget to hook up the light. Another thing for some reason I tend to forget. Cinch down the trunk. Tighten up the trim. Everything would appear to be lining up quite nicely. Here again are those bumpers that we talked about. I know all of you are masters, but when you do this and you're putting back the trim, make sure if it's not carbon, light touch is always better. Otherwise, later down the road, oftentimes you will find cracks, and then you'll become like me, the master of epoxy, fixing things. One thing worth mentioning is when you're putting the trim back in, especially near the rear of the hood, pay careful attention you put it in right and the tabs are underneath the fender. Don't be like me. I made a couple mistakes, and at one point I actually chipped the carbon hood because it hooked the trim and needed to be repaired. Done, ready to run. What seemed like a lengthy video to you was actually a very long time for me, and I'm quite happy that this project is now finished. Of course, there's one last thing to do, and that is take it out on the road to see how it looks. Other than that, I'll see you next time.